The sound of his words cut deeper than any wound Emily had ever known. "Don't interfere. I'm marrying someone else." Ryan's tone was calm, cold, and final. For a second, time seemed to freeze around her. The bustling city lights outside his office blurred behind the glass, and all she could hear was the echo of a heart breaking silently inside her chest. She had come there to tell him something that could have changed everything, something that might have made him stay. But looking at his unreadable expression, she knew it was already too late. Emily's voice trembled as she tried to speak. "Ryan, why?" He finally met her eyes, and for a moment she thought she saw regret flicker there. But it vanished just as quickly. "Because love doesn't build empires," he said flatly. "Ambition does." Her throat tightened. The man who once promised to protect her was now chasing a life where she no longer fit. Every memory, the laughter, the plans, the late-night talks, suddenly felt like a story she'd imagined. With trembling hands, she touched her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter within. She wanted to tell him, "You're going to be a father," but the words turned to ash on her tongue. Ryan picked up his jacket, glancing at his reflection instead of her. "Take care of yourself, Emily. You deserve better." Better? The irony stung. She wanted to ask if better meant a life without love, without him, without the dreams they once built together. But pride, her last defense, forced her to stand tall. She walked out of his office, each step heavy but defiant. The city outside greeted her with cold wind and flashing lights, whispering of endings and beginnings she didn't yet understand. Tears blurred her vision, but a quiet resolve formed inside her. She wouldn't beg him to stay. She wouldn't break. Not when there was another heartbeat inside her depending on her strength. As she disappeared into the night, one thought burned brighter than pain. Someday, he would realize what he had lost. The city felt different that night, colder and louder than she remembered. Emily wrapped her coat tighter around herself as she walked through the rain-soaked streets, every drop mixing with her silent tears. She didn't know where to go, but she knew she couldn't go back. Ryan had made his choice, and now she had to make hers. Her trembling hand rested on her stomach again, the only reminder that she wasn't truly alone. Life was already growing inside her, fragile but full of promise. That thought alone gave her the courage to keep moving. She found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. It was old, walls chipped, the heater barely worked, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. But it was hers. She worked long hours as a junior designer in a company that barely paid enough for food and rent. Every night, when exhaustion threatened to crush her, she would sit by the window, whispering softly to the tiny heartbeat within her. "You're my reason now," she'd say. "I'll make sure you never feel what I feel tonight." The months passed slowly. Her body changed, her dreams changed, but her determination grew stronger. She skipped meals to save money, walked instead of taking the bus, and studied motherhood through borrowed library books. Sometimes she caught herself imagining Ryan's face if he ever knew, but she quickly pushed that thought away. He belonged to another world now, one made of wealth and power. When the doctor placed the ultrasound photo in her hand and said softly, "You're having twins," she froze. 2 heartbeats, 2 lives depending on her. Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow but of fierce pride. The loneliness she carried suddenly felt lighter. She smiled for the first time in months, pressing the image to her chest. You both will have everything I never did, she whispered. Outside, the world kept spinning, unaware of the quiet strength of a woman rebuilding herself from ashes. Emily didn't know what destiny had planned, but one thing was certain. She would never let her children grow up believing they weren't enough. Days turned into months, and Emily's small apartment began to echo with the soft cries of two miracles. The night she gave birth was long and painful, but when the nurse placed two tiny girls in her arms, every hardship she'd faced suddenly made sense. Haley and Hannah, her entire world wrapped in soft blankets. Their little hands clung to her finger, as if promising that they would never let her fall again. Emily had no one by her side that night, yet she didn't feel alone. The warmth of her daughters filled every empty space Ryan's absence had left behind. Life after that was far from easy. The nights were endless, filled with feedings, lullabies, and quiet tears she never let her girls see. She worked part-time during the day and took freelance design projects at night, often sleeping only a few hours. But every morning, when two pairs of innocent eyes looked up at her with trust and love, it was enough to keep her going. There were moments when she passed tall buildings downtown, the same skyline Ryan once ruled, and her heart would twist. Sometimes she imagined him walking through those marble halls, surrounded by power and luxury, unaware that the most beautiful part of his life had been born without him. But instead of bitterness, she chose purpose. As Haley and Hannah grew, Emily taught them kindness, strength, and hope. She read them bedtime stories about courage and dreams, whispering lessons she had learned through pain. And slowly, she built a quiet life filled with laughter and warmth, a life Ryan would never know existed. Yet fate has a strange way of circling back. 5 years later, Emily's design work caught the attention of a major company, one owned by Blake Enterprises. When she received the email inviting her for a meeting, her hands trembled. The sender's name was one she had promised never to speak again: Ryan Blake. Emily stared at the email on her laptop screen for a long time, her heart thudding louder than the ticking clock beside her. Ryan Blake, the name that once brought warmth, now sent chills down her spine. After 5 long years, life had come full circle. She had rebuilt herself from the ruins he left behind, and now fate was calling her back to face the very man who shattered her world. Her first instinct was to delete the message and pretend she had never seen it. But something deep within whispered, "You've come too far to hide now." The next morning she stood outside the towering glass building of Blake Enterprises. Everything looked the same. The sharp scent of polished marble, the echo of expensive shoes against the floor, the silent hum of ambition in the air. But Emily was not the same woman who once left this place in tears. She was stronger, wiser, and had 2 reasons to keep her heart steady: her daughters. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall. Gone was the fragile girl Ryan had dismissed. In her place stood a woman of quiet confidence, dressed in grace and determination. As she entered the conference room, their eyes met for the first time in years. Ryan froze mid-sentence, his voice faltering. For a moment he looked as if he'd seen a ghost. Emily managed a polite smile and extended her hand. "Good morning, Mr. Blake. I'm the designer you requested." The shock in his eyes was unmistakable. He tried to mask it behind his usual composed expression, but the slight tremor in his voice betrayed him. Emily. It's been a long time, 5 years, she replied softly. I hear your company's doing well. Their conversation was formal, professional, but underneath the surface, old memories stirred like a storm waiting to break. Ryan found himself distracted, noticing the calm strength in her voice, the confidence in her posture. He realized she wasn't the same woman who once looked at him with pleading eyes. She was radiant and untouchable. When the meeting ended, Ryan watched her leave, his mind spinning with questions he didn't know how to ask. For the first time in years, the empire he built suddenly felt empty. Ryan couldn't focus after that meeting. Every file he opened blurred into nothing. Every phone call felt distant. Emily's calm face haunted his thoughts. Not because she was the same woman he once loved, but because she wasn't. She had changed in a way that both unsettled and fascinated him. That quiet strength, the way she carried herself, the spark in her eyes, it all reminded him of the life he could have had if he hadn't let greed and pride decide for him. That evening, unable to resist, he searched her name online. What he found stopped him cold. A feature in a local magazine titled, Rising Designer and Single Mother of Twins, Emily Carter. His eyes froze on the picture, Emily smiling with 2 little girls holding her hands. They looked around 4, identical, with soft brown curls and eyes that mirrored his own. His chest tightened as realization hit him like a wave. Twins. His heartbeat quickened, his breath shallow. He whispered their names as he read the article, Haley and Hannah. For hours he sat in silence, the world around him fading into background noise. Memories of the night he told her to stay out of his way replayed in his mind like a cruel echo. Now he understood what she had wanted to tell him that day. She hadn't been chasing him. She'd been trying to give him the truth he refused to hear. The next morning, he drove to her neighborhood, the streets narrower and quieter than the ones he was used to. From his car, he saw Emily walking the twins to school, their laughter filling the air. They looked so alive, so full of joy. Ryan's eyes burned as he realized they were his daughters, yet strangers to him. He wanted to run to them, to tell them he was their father, but guilt rooted him in place. Emily noticed him before he could move. Her steps slowed for a moment, surprise flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. She simply smiled faintly, gave his car one last look, and walked on, holding her daughter's hands tighter. Ryan sat there long after they were gone, the image seared into his heart. For the first time in his life, his success felt meaningless. He had built an empire, but he had lost his family before it ever began. Ryan sat in his car for hours, watching the world move on without him. The weight of 5 years pressed on his chest like a silent storm. He had spent those years chasing deals, awards, and numbers, never realizing that while he was building an empire, he was tearing down his own soul. That night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the twins' faces, their laughter echoing through his empty apartment. He tried to drown it out with work, but nothing silenced the ache growing inside him. Days later, he gathered the courage to see her again. Emily opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across her face when she saw him standing there in the rain. No longer the unshakable CEO, but a man finally broken by his own choices. "What do you want, Ryan?" Her voice was calm, steady. He hesitated, words tangled in regret. To say I'm sorry for everything I didn't know about them. His eyes drifted toward the laughter coming from the living room. Haley and Hannah were playing, their giggles soft as music. Emily's expression softened, but only slightly. They don't know who you are. I never told them. Ryan swallowed hard. Can I meet them? She studied him for a long moment, searching for sincerity. Finally, she nodded once. The door opened wider, and he stepped inside. The girls turned, curious eyes locking onto him. For a brief second, Ryan forgot how to breathe. It was like looking at pieces of himself he never knew existed. "Hi," he said gently, kneeling down. "I'm a friend of your mom." They smiled shyly before returning to their toys. Watching them, Ryan felt a warmth he hadn't known in years, a sense of home. Later that evening, as he was about to leave, Emily spoke quietly. "They don't need your money, Ryan. They just need to know they were never the mistake you thought I was." Tears blurred his vision as he nodded. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." When he walked out, the rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered like a second chance. For the first time in years, Ryan wasn't chasing power. He was chasing redemption. And deep down, Emily knew he might finally become the man she once believed he could be.